Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Normie Recertification Training. Today is September 19th, 2023. I want to welcome everybody to the last few days of summer. Yeah, fall is almost here. So if you need to make plans for that, emotionally or not, it's going to happen. So welcome, everyone. And I want to welcome everybody on the social media platforms and streaming platforms that we have out there. We should be live on everything right now. So welcome, welcome, welcome. How you doing there, Tim?
Good, and I'm happy fall's coming.
Yes, you do like the cooler weather. You do live in a warm climate, so I understand
Yes,
that.
I do.
And you too, Roger. No, you were muted, but we'll go with that. That's fine. Hey, I want to make an announcement to everybody before we get started. So everybody pay attention on all the different platforms. First of all, I want to thank all of you that are using the Normie app. And if you don't have the Normie app, you can go to the Play Store for the Android phones or for the iPhones to the App Store and just search the word Normie, N-O-R-M-I. You can download the app to your phone. And as a special thank you for all of you that are using the phone, we're going to be sending out a notification to the app sometime during the training here tonight. So if you have it on your phone and you received actually a notification at 5 minutes before the top of the hour, your phone's already on, it's already working, your app is there, and your notifications are turned on. If your notifications are not turned on and you have the app, you may want to turn it on so you don't miss this announcement. And for those of you that don't have the app, what are you waiting for? Go get it. Add it to your phone and it'll ask you if you want notifications on. Just say yes. We won't bombard you with stuff, but there'll be a special thank you for those that are using the app during this session. And that offer or thank you will expire at 1 minute to midnight tonight, Eastern time. So you can't drag your feet. You can't see this in a replay and add it. Got to take care of it tonight. So hope you all take advantage of that. With that being said, I'm going to move into the training portion of this. And I think what we're going to do is hold the announcements for the end, Tim, if that's okay, because I want to keep it public for everybody. So I'm going to ask all of our admin people to shut down their video and mics. I'm going to do the same. I'm going to bring up a presentation and then I will be talking. If there are any questions, hopefully the admin people in the background will be handling those because I can't handle the questions at the moment while I am doing the presentation. So please stand by, everybody, and we'll take questions as you send them, and then we can chat afterwards. So stand by, everybody. And hopefully everybody can see the screen. Standard testing methods and equipment can get some.
We got it.
All right, very good, very good. Sorry, it took a few seconds there to bring that up. Zoom just keeps on changing stuff on me, but it happens. So we're going to talk about some of the standard testing methods and equipment that are available out there for assessors, remediators, home inspectors, or even somebody that just wants to do it yourself. There's many options, many different types of equipment, many different reasons for doing sampling, testing, and I'm using those words separately. And we're going to talk about some of that as we go through this tonight. So let's get started. Let's first talk about the types of samples or sampling or reporting methods that are out there. And I described that 3 different ways because it really has 3 different meanings. The typical types of sampling methods that are out there that are used by most assessors, inspectors, remediators are ones that are what we call viable, non-viable, and VOCs, volatile organic compounds. Now, there are differences, and the main difference is the way that the results are reported. Now, yes, there are some different methods for taking the samples and testing. However, the reporting is the big difference. Viable means you're going to find out what is living or thriving or growing. So you get your report based on that. Non-viable is going to tell you what is there in the sample. insect parts and legs. Obviously, they're not growing and thriving. Mold spores that may or may not be viable, living or not. And that gives you different information. And VOCs, volatile organic compounds, and we have to throw into that the MVOCs, mold volatile organic compounds. And that's chemistries that are in the air. And I call it chemistries instead of saying chemicals, because sometimes there's combinations, often there's combinations, but you get different results from different labs, specifically based on the type of sample that you took and the type of results you are looking for. So keep that in mind as we go through the rest of this presentation. All right. To do successful testing, there's certain things that you have to have a mindset for. Obviously, you're going to sample or test, and I'll talk about the differences in that in a little bit, but there are definite differences. Now I'm going to shut my video down here just to make it a little bit easier. With that being said, there's always the question as to why you took a sample or why you didn't take a sample, why you took a viable sample as opposed to a non-viable, why you did VOC sampling. These are questions you have to be able to answer as to why you did it and why you didn't do it. And we're going to talk more about that as we go through the presentation, but just kind of setting this up to keep it in the back of your mind. All right, as far as technologies go, there are prepaid kits you can get. You can get just basic testing equipment and sampling media. And there are so many different options that I'm going to let this just scroll here. And no, you're not seeing something that isn't really there. These are just some of the many different types of sampling technologies, media, and equipment that are out there. Many options, many, many, many. And the brand isn't even as important as what it does and what lab you're using, and will the lab be able to work with the samples and the type of media that you're sending them. So how do you decide? Well, to decide what sampling testing methods to use, you need to be able to answer a question. And I kind of talked about it a few minutes ago, but I'm going to do it again because it is probably the most important thing that you need to know before you do any sampling, or what type of sampling, or what type of equipment to use. There's the question, why? Why are you going to take a sample at that location? Why are you going to use that sampling method? Why aren't you going to take a sample there? Why are you going to choose to use a viable as opposed to non-viable, or maybe both? You need to be able to articulate to the consumer, to a court, if it ever goes that far, why you did or didn't do something. One of the nasty little secrets about lawsuits and things that get people in trouble is that it really isn't about what you did or the type of results you got, but it's about why you did it, why you didn't do it, why you were trained, why you weren't trained. And this is all about, and I hate to use the term character assassination, but it really refers to your credibility. And if you can't explain why you took a sample, or why you didn't take a sample, or why you took combinations and didn't take combinations, your credibility is going to go out the window. And if you can't answer this question, why you took a sample at that location, that's a problem. An example would be, Mr. Smith, why did you sample my client's return duct into the air conditioning system? Well, I wanted to see what was in the air. Okay. And something grew there. What does that tell you about his indoor air quality or his mold problem in his 4,000 square foot house? That mold collected at the return grill. There has to be a detailed explanation of meaning. It has to be able to show value for why you did that. You're charging the customer for the sample. So it's got to be done for a reason. Got to remember that intake is kind of at the bottom of a funnel. Everything in that large environment is being pulled to that one location. So if you do get growth there, is it from the bedroom, the kitchen, the crawl space, the attic? You don't know. You just know that there was growth there. Without taking additional samples in other parts of the house, you don't know if it's a systemic problem, if it's just something that kind of gathered there and it was a metal grill and all the air coming in, there was some condensation. You don't know. Same thing with supply registers. You may see growth on them. It's good to sample it to know what it is. But if that growth is no other place in the house, it may not be because it's a systemic problem. It may just be because there's a little extra moisture there and something happened to grow. You need to be able to explain why you did or didn't do it. Now, I also talk often about words meaning things. Well, it's true. And one of the issues is in our industry, we use terminology that means different things in different industries. So your point of reference when you're dealing with a customer or a lab or a remediator or an assessor, depending on where you're positioned in the conversation, you really need to make sure you're all talking the same language with understanding. So a sample, it's a small part of anything or one of a number intended to show the quality, style, or nature of the whole specimen. So a sample basically is a small piece of something larger. It's also the media that you use to send to the lab. It has multiple meanings, so you have to have the right context there. Test, the means by which the presence, quality, quantity, and genuineness of anything is determined, the means of a trial. So you're being more specific. You're looking for qualitative and quantitative analysis of something. You're trying to determine what it is or what it isn't. And screening, it's a less detailed test of a sample showing more generalized results, presence without quantity. Think of an ATP luminometer. When you swab a surface with that, you're going to get results saying that it's either, quote, clean, slightly contaminated, heavily contaminated, but it doesn't tell you with what. It's giving you some information. It's giving you non-qualified information saying it's mold, it's bacteria, it's viruses, it's dirt. It's only going to tell you what's there, what has produced ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is basically the presence of life on a surface. And that's all you're going to get out of that. That's screening compared to testing, where you're getting a qualitative and quantitative analysis. And sample, again, is a small part of something or the medium by which you send your samples to the lab, using the term in the definition. So let's talk about surface sampling. Surface sampling sometimes confuses people because they think if they're using a swab, it has to be a viable sample. That's not the case. It also is an indication that there may be something other than mold or biological contaminant on a surface. You may see a black area or dark area around a window, and you swab it and you send it into the lab to be cultured, and nothing grows. Maybe you've identified the infamous mascara that we've seen in all of the fraud videos and investigative stories about mold fraud. You know, that's all you detected. There was nothing viable there, nothing grew, nothing alive, but it doesn't identify what's there. A tape sample of the same spot could then be looked at under a microscope and identified as dirt, soot, insect parts, or mold, or yeast, but nothing viable. Now, the one piece I left out was many labs have the ability to take a swab sample that you send to them and dilute it into a solution made up to extract whatever the contaminant is on the tip of the swab, and then allows it to be plated onto a slide that can be identified as non-viable. So different labs have different procedures and policies and things that they are capable of doing. So keep that in mind, that you are not locked into one size fits all with some of these samples. Just as a final note on this, and I'll talk a little bit more about surface sampling as we go on, is if you see growth on the wall, what appears to be growth, doing a swab sample and a tape lift sample is often a good idea, obviously an inch or two apart from each other. Because if you're swabbing an area and you get zero growth, it could be dirt, it could be soot, which is what the tape lift will tell you. Or it could be an area that the homeowner, business owner, or occupant sprayed with something that killed off the mold, if it was mold or bacteria, and made it non-viable. It won't show up if it's already been killed off. So there are things to consider when you're doing this type of sampling. Now, air sampling, this opens up a whole nother situation and complexity to what we do. The industry looks at air sampling as a must, mainly because of the insurance companies, because they want to compare apples to apples. They want to say that the outside air is at a number and the inside air is either higher or lower than the outside, better or worse. Well, in theory, that sounds good. The problem is, and I'll use the example of February in Fargo, North Dakota, at 6 below zero and a snowstorm is going to show not much spores floating around out in the outdoor air compared to any number inside that's going to appear high to whatever you got outside. The reverse of that is Louisiana. We hear Doug talk about that all the time. It's a petri dish, especially since Katrina and other hurricanes have come through there, that the outside spore count is enormous compared to the inside counts in some houses. And does that mean that the inside count with 20 or 30,000 spores per cubic meter is good or just better than outside? So you have to be cautious when you're doing air sampling to understand what your results mean and why you're taking them. Now, there's quite a few different devices up here on the screen because there's different types of air sampling that can be done. In the center of the screen is a device from Enthalpy Labs, and they do VOC and MVOC testing, mold, volatile organic compounds, and volatile organic compounds, chemicals or chemistries in the air. Now, there are other tests and labs that are capable of doing this testing also. There's a test out there called a TO15, which has been around for a very long time. I remember using it like 15, 20 years ago, because that's all that was available for that type of testing, where you're renting basically a large metal canister with a regulator on it that's going to pull air in over a specific amount of time, 4 hours, 8 hours, 12, 24 hours, whatever you feel is necessary to test. And then you have to ship that back to the lab, and you will get an extremely detailed report from that. Word of caution, unless you're a chemical engineer or extremely familiar with the chemistries involved with the property that you are sampling, you're going to have a hard time interpreting those results and knowing what's supposed to be there. The air sampling or VOC sampling in the middle of the page from Enthalpy, they will also do a detailed analysis. However, their report is written much simpler and easy to understand. It also does predictability as to what could be causing the elevation of chemistries. Depends what you're looking for. Depends on why you're doing VOC sampling or MVOC sampling, which method you use. I can tell you to rent the TO15 system at least several years ago, and the last time I used one was probably about $1,100 or $1,200 as a deposit alone, just to get the equipment shipped to you. You get your money back when you return it, but it's quite expensive. Also on this page, we have the aerosol cassettes, which I talked about earlier. Those are in the bottom left corner. In the bottom right corner. In the upper left corner, you'll see a device that can do portable aerosol sampling. And there are many different types of pumps, from pumps under $100 to pumps that could be $1,000 or more. Some are computerized, some do timing, self-calibrating, all different types of equipment Depends on what you're going to do with it and where you're going to use it. If you do a lot of outdoor testing, you're going to want one that's going to run on a battery system, because dragging really long extension cords is time consuming and very cumbersome to do. In the upper right corner is a device from a company called Air Answers. Now, this device has a lot of very specific testing dynamics to it. And let me go to the next slide and I'll explain a little bit of that. But before I do that, one last one on the bottom left. That is a Dylos particulate counter, which is going to count specific size and amounts of particulate in the air. It will not identify what it is, just like the ATP luminometer. It's more of a screening device, but it will tell you the particulates and the size over 2.5 microns or just above 0.5 microns, which is submicron size. These are the particles that cause so much damage to people with allergies and breathing problems, asthma and such. Plus, very small particulate can cross directly into your blood system from going into your lungs. Something to think about. They're very good to use if you're doing remediation projects. You can get interim readings with these to find out if you're really reducing the particulate in the air as you're doing your work. So I mentioned the Air Answers device. So just an idea on some of the testing that they do. The device can require for allergens and mold a 5-day run period to test for allergens. Mold determination can also be made from the same 5-day sample. For mold, the device requires a 24-hour run period to test for mold only, and it is capable of testing for SARS-CoV-2, but that's a 3-day run. Now, there's advantages and disadvantages. You can get very specific third-party lab results from Air Answers with detailed analysis of what has been detected in the air, including airborne SARS-CoV-2. But it does take time to run these tests. The sampling that I showed you prior to this slide, most of that is done same day or within an hour or two max. And you're on your way. This type of equipment you either have to go back for or have the customer turn it off and send it to you to process. But again, it has a reason. You have to answer the question why to use it, why not to use it. Moving on to the VOCs, volatile organic compounds. Again, chemistry is in the air. Now, as a side note, if you do a lot of traveling, you're going to do out-of-state sampling work. You're going to travel to a different part of the country to work because of a disaster or a hurricane or flood that's been there. Consider the image on the left when that suitcase is closed and you're going through the X-ray scanner at TSA at the airport. Be prepared to answer questions. Be prepared to have supervisors come and approach you and say, what is this? Just because of the way it looks and it's packed. So keep that in mind. I'd hate for you to be traveling with that and be surprised. Again, the image on the right is the sampling pump. You can see they're fairly small. The kit itself has 2 pumps in it, which is what I'm showing up there on the screen. Now, they do have a newer version of this. I don't have the image of that to show, but again, it's something that is an extremely useful tool. I can't tell you how many jobs I've done where people have insisted that they've had a mold problem, and you take all kinds of mold sampling, and it comes back when you do your VOC test that there was no mold real detection, very low counts, but the VOCs were very high for petroleum products or healthcare products, alcohol and things like that, that are normally used in a house, cleaning products that could be causing health issues for the occupants. Again, why did you do this test? Why didn't you do this test? And so on. We mentioned the particulate counter earlier. Just wanted to show you a bigger picture of it and show you that greater than 0.5 microns, which is still submicron, anything under 1 micron is submicron, and then larger than 2.5, which is basically your mold spores. And these are the things that this is going to monitor for you. And it's an extremely useful tool, whether you're doing a walk around assessment to find out what's going on in the environment. Again, real-time snapshot of what's happening, and you can get an idea when you're giving an estimate or trying to formulate a work plan, mold plan to deal with the process of remediation or sanitization. What I didn't show you earlier on the aerosols was something called a VIACell. The VIACells are capable of doing viable air sampling. So it just takes it to another level. You need to make sure that the lab you're using is capable of processing VIACells, which I'm sure almost all of them or all certified labs are. And it's just another option for you to use. You can do regular non-viable, direct read as they call it, or VIACell. Now, there was an issue several years ago with regular aerosols. And what was happening was people were doing sampling, sending it to the lab. The lab would open up the canister and there was no glass plate inside with anything on it for them to analyze under a microscope. There was a quality control issue where the glass plates on certain canisters weren't being put in. So to avoid that, Zephon, which is one of the main manufacturers here, has added a dot, a black dot to the slide. So if you're using an aerosol, take a look into the slide or into the canister and see if you see a black dot on there. If you do, you know there's a glass plate in there, you're good to go. ATP luminometer. This is an amazing tool for sampling as far as a screening technique. Now, the sample you take is taken on that swab that's in the upper portion of the slide there. Now, there's several components to that. There is a swab. When you pull off the top, the swab comes out, you're going to swab a surface a little bit bigger than you would normally do with a regular swab for mold. You're going to cover probably about 3 or 4 square inches. You're going to place that back into the tube. The top of that swab tube has a liquid. You snap that liquid drops down as a reagent, causing a reaction with whatever was picked up from the sample. Now, the picture on the left is the full hygienoluminometer. The top opens, you drop the swab into it, you close the top, and in 15 seconds, it's going to give you in relative light units what the contamination level is based on a scale of what was on the surface that you swabbed. So if you're going through a very clean environment and you have no idea where to take surface samples, you might want to check with a luminometer. They're about $1 or $2 a piece. And you swab an area, you drop it in, say, oh, this area is contaminated. I'm going to test here. And it could be bacteria, could be like just a regular bacteria growth, could be yeast, could be mold, could be anything. But it was something that was living or alive to the point where it had deposited ATP on the surface. So this is a great tool to use, especially for interim assessments. If you're going to do a start of a sanitization or remediation project and you're a remediator, taking several swab samples in different areas will give you a baseline as to what's there before you start. Costs you only a few dollars to use multiple swabs to come back halfway through the project or partially through it and take some more swabs samples and test and see in those areas, did you reduce it? If not, you better go back and clean some more. And when you're just about ready for your clearance or PRV testing, depending on which part of the country you're in, what terminology they use, you can go in there before the assessor shows up, do some quick swab sampling and say, hey, these surfaces are good. Or, oh, wait a minute, we better clean this area here. I'm getting a high reading. Gives you another tool that will help you provide a better service for your customer. There's the why. Makes it very simple. Thermal imaging. Now, I would ask how many of you out there are thermal imagers, but I'm sure quite a few of you have thermal imagers and you use them. Hopefully, you got trained to use them, not you picked up the camera and like most guys do, okay, I can figure this out and start using it. There's a lot of science behind thermal imaging, what it can do, what it can't do. If you watch CSI or any of those police stories, The helicopter flying overhead using thermal imaging, looking down at the building, can't see people, can't see their thermal pattern. Same thing from the outside, you can't do it. The only thing a thermal imager will do is find a differential in temperatures on a surface. So if you're shining or pointing this camera towards a surface, and part of that surface is damp or being heated from the opposite side or cooled from the opposite side, you're going to see a difference. Something is going to be different. It's called an anomaly. And that is what is going to direct your attention to go with additional screening and testing. For instance, if you are looking at a wall where you believe there was a leak and you're seeing a pattern of what could be what water would look like running down a wall or moisture on that wall, well, you can identify that and then go test it with a moisture meter and see if there's actual moisture there. Or it could be animals or rodents on the inside of that wall, just creating extra body heat, heating that surface, or termites. Could be a lot of things, or missing insulation showing a cooler or hotter pattern based on the time of the year and where you're located. You need to be trained to use and interpret this equipment. And the question of why, because you're using technology that if you're ever questioned about, especially in court, your credibility is going to go right out the window with everything else that you've presented if you're using equipment you don't know what you're doing with. I always recommend get trained first before you even buy equipment. And I can tell you that if you look at the two pieces of equipment there, one on the left, one on the right, I am sure there is a big difference in price. They will both probably do about the same, but you can ride to the corner grocery store for a loaf of bread on a bicycle, get there and get back, or you could take the Lamborghini in your neighbor's driveway and do the same thing. You're buying a loaf of bread. You're testing or looking at a wall for some moisture. You don't need a $30,000 or $40,000 piece of equipment when a $1,500 piece of equipment or a $500 piece that you can fit in your pocket will work just as well. While I'm on that, I've noticed recently that a lot of our assessors and remediators rely heavily on their smartphone devices to the point where they're using those devices, taking pictures during assessments and remediation projects. I have several issues here. I just want to bring them up. You can make your own decisions with that. One, you're wearing gloves, you're wearing PPE, you have goggles on, but you take your phone out, which has no protection on it whatsoever. You're walking through a contaminated environment, you're shoving it back in your pocket, and at some point you're going to answer a phone call with it and put it up against your face. Just something to think about. Another issue to think about is if you ever do get called into court, you're going to be asked, well, how did you take these images? Well, I used my phone. What do you mean you used your phone? That one that's there? I want you all to think about the most embarrassing picture you possibly could have on that phone, because that phone is now discoverable in court. Everything that you've done with that phone is now discoverable. So if that's not a good enough reason to have a smaller camera or an inexpensive camera just to take pictures, I don't know what else is. Plus, I don't know about you, but dropping a inexpensive camera from an attic or it falling out of your hands and breaking is a lot cheaper and less intrusive on your lifestyle than dropping and breaking your phone. But it's your choice to do what you want, as long as you can answer why. So again, we talked earlier about swab samples and tape lift samples, and I have a few of them up here. I believe 6 and 6. Now we recommend at least 6 samples, combination surface, air, VOCs, for a air conditioning zone. I personally take 10 to 12 minimum. And that's a combination of my swab samples, tape lift, VOCs. Sometimes I'll do bacteria sampling, because I want to be able to describe a detailed picture for the analysis that I'm doing, and for me to be able to explain it to the customer, and if it ever went to court, to the court, what I did, what my results were, and how I'm confident that I knew whether it was a systemic problem, all over, single area, whatever. Keep that in mind that when you're going out to do a job, don't take 6 swabs and 6 tape lifts, or just 6 swabs if you're going to do a house that you've quoted for 6 samples, because I can guarantee you at some point you're going to drop one or break one or lose it or do something that you can't reverse the problem, and now you're going to need extra ones. Or where you see things that say, I better take a sample of that. I won't even charge the customer. I need to do this. I need to do this for my own comfort zone of doing an analysis. Take extra stuff with you. That may look like a bunch of stuff up on the screen, but truthfully, when you're doing an assessment and you walk in and the 2,000 square foot assessed area that you're doing turns into a 6 or an 8 or 10,000 square foot assessment, and you're not going to have the supplies to do it. It's extremely embarrassing. Almost as embarrassing as using any of this technology I just talked about that you've never used before, or at least in your own home, so you're comfortable using it. I don't know about you, but having a professional come to my house, take out a piece of equipment, and the first thing they open up is the instruction manual doesn't give me that feeling of confidence, and you shouldn't do the same for your customers. So, do you buy a kit? Do you build a kit? What kind of equipment do you get? Again, why is the question. Well, why would you need a moisture meter? Why do you need an air pump? Why do you need a kit to transport all this stuff in? There's a lot of different pieces of equipment that you will find that you need as you do this profession longer and longer. Some of it's oddball stuff that you may only use once or twice a year. Other stuff you're going to use every day. These are the things that you want to take with you. I can tell you that I have done numerous jobs in areas where parking has been a problem, where you need to walk quite a distance. If any of you have ever worked in New York City or Philadelphia or any of the bigger cities, you're not parking anywhere near where the job is. So you're going to need a way to transport your equipment. A kit on rollers works very well. You may want to build one of those for yourself. What do you put in it? Well, it depends on the job type that you're going to be doing or the work you decide you want to do. If you're going to do just simple allergy testing, well, you can kind of limit to the type of samples that you're going to do, but it's also going to limit your revenue, the type of customers you're going to get. You have to remember that everything that we do and talk about comes under the umbrella of indoor air quality. It's all about people that have to breathe, and they all do. So what's affecting them? The cleaning chemicals they're using, the remediation products that were used, the allergens in the air. You know, is it something they stored in their garage? Is it mold? Is it pollen? Is it insects? Depending on what you want to test for, depends on the different types of equipment you're going to need. Moisture meters, the same thing, whether you use pinned or pinless. Some are more accurate than others. Usually the pinned ones are more accurate, but they can cause damage because you're actually stabbing into the surface that you're sampling. Now, if you're doing an area where you need to penetrate sheetrock to find out if the insulation is wet behind it, you absolutely need pin meters. But non-pin meters are good for general use as long as you're not dealing with aluminum studded walls, unless you're aware of them. They can interfere. So again, there's reasons to use things, reasons not to use things. But again, you put it in your kit. Your kit is designed to help and function for the job and type of work that you're going to do. Keep that in mind. Now you can buy pre-made kits, absolutely. Good starter kits, and then you add on or swap out for better equipment as you go. Or you can do some research. You can talk to people at Normie or other locations and businesses and find out what they use. All different options. That's why people drive Chevys and Fords and all kinds of other cars. They have preferences. Now, earlier today, I mentioned the Normie app. This is what it looks like in its current form. And I say that because we do change icons every once in a while, and using the app will automatically update every time we make a change to it. It's instant. And we've added a lot of other features to it since we've talked about this, including some puzzle type challenges that are on there for training purposes under the training tab and such. And we will continue to add to this. But we also have things out there like under remediation, the steps to a successful remediation project. If you're ever out and you need to discuss that with somebody, it's there. The point of me showing this to you is you should all have this loaded on your phone. This is going to give you an insight into the normie world. We have a lot of support features here for you. And like earlier today, I mentioned that if you have the app on your phone and you have notifications turned on for the app, at some point, if it already hasn't happened, we're sending out a notification with a special as a thank you for using the app. And if you missed it, you should still have it on your phone because we're going to do this again. And you won't want to miss out on the next thank you. So there's all different ways to do this. Again, the easiest way is to go to your app store, whether it's for iPhone or Android, Google Play or the iPhone App Store, and you can download it there and it's straight onto your phone. It's simple. There's no cost to it and you're good to go. It also would give you access to the Normie TV channel and a lot of other things, including our podcasts. And it's made to be handy and useful no matter where you are. So hopefully you will take advantage of that. For those of you that are watching this on our Zoom platform or any of the other social media platforms, we also have our own TV website, which is normie.tv. If you have a phone with you now and you want to scan that QR code, it'll actually take you right there, or just go to normie.tv. And again, we are broadcasting 24/7, different content, interviews and such. We are live now on all 12 platforms that we're on, and actually we'll be shutting it down shortly. So this is to remind me to tell all of our Normie members that in a little bit, if you are watching on the social media platforms or normie.tv, you need to go to impact.normie.org. And that will bring you into our Zoom room. And when we shut down the public feed, then we'll have some private announcements for our active Normie members. If you're not an active Normie member, join.normie.org. It's that simple. And then you'll be able to take advantage of the things that we can't say here. Well, let me stop this. Hopefully that gave you an insight into some of the different sampling methods, technologies, and equipment that are out there. And there's many more advanced pieces of equipment out there. But if you're not familiar with this equipment, you don't need to be looking at the more advanced yet, because there are so many different things involved in tweaking those advanced pieces of equipment, advanced testing methods, that you can get into more trouble than not. A quick example, if any of you use Petri dishes for sampling, if you're not extremely cautious, or you're mixing your own medium to put into the dish, your own agar, the problem is if the dish is not sterilized correctly, you could have a contamination growing underneath the solution that you poured in, which is going to interfere with whatever they see at the lab. Has to be refrigerated correctly, shipped correctly. Different technologies, different purposes, different challenges, depending on what you're using it for. So I'm going to ask the admin people real quick to come back in here. Were there any questions or comments in the room while we went through that? I didn't see any, but I can't when I'm sharing my screen.
I actually have a question that I'm working with a couple of our new members, and I want to ask this in a generic way, so it's not directed at anybody, but they have considered partnering up, a couple of people have considered partnering up with folks to get started after they've gotten their licensing and gotten their initial training. And in one or two cases, people are doing their own testing. So they're taking samples, they're going out to their vehicle or whatever. I assume they're using a microscope. Can you talk to that a little bit in comparison with types of testing that
Sure.
you just reviewed? I think that'd be good for a lot of folks to hear.
Well, here's the few things that initially jump out with a question like that. First of all, the whole third-party testing goes out the window. You're not looking at a third party doing this testing for credibility. And now you have to explain why you did it. And are you really qualified to do that? Are you a microbiologist? Are you doing it under clean enough conditions out in the parking lot? You know, could the slides become contaminated or, you know, while you're doing your analysis? Whole host of issues that way. Does it make it quicker? Yes. Is it something that everybody can do? No. There's a lot of different technologies and techniques out there, like using a mold dog. You know, the dog doesn't look at a microscope. The dog doesn't do sampling. The dog smells what they've been trained to smell for mold, and they will sit down in an area that they believe has mold. But then you have to do follow-up to that. You have to do sampling to confirm it. It's just a screening device. There's a video out there that we use in a lot of our classes of a guy that says, once mold is dead, it's not mold, it's dirt. And it's harmless. You can even lick it, and he does. That's pretty much the reaction that most of the people watching the video say, really? And some people buy into this kind of stuff.
Disclaimer, Lance, this is not in the normie professional practices.
That is correct. I am giving examples of what other people do out there. And yes, the normie professional practices does not recommend, you know, these types of behaviors. I mean, it's got to make sense. And again, we address the question, why? Why would you do that? Why would you take on the responsibility of third-party testing being pushed aside and take the responsibility onto yourself to analyze? You know, that's, you know, it's not really what I consider fair to the customer, because it's what you say. You know, it's like the guy that comes in and looks around and goes, yep, you got mold. Let's gut the place, $100,000. That was their decision. They made it. There's no evidence to back that up, and it's whether they've convinced you or not to do it. So the normie professional practices is the guide that we go by for doing assessments, doing remediation, doing clearance and PRV work, interim testing, dealing with sensitized individuals. It's all there. It's an insured document. It's designed to give you guidance and backing as long as you're following the procedures. If you're not, you're out on the ledge by yourself.
Well, I'm glad you told me that, because, you know, my first instinct would be to go into people's houses and start licking things.
There you have it. Not in the normie professional practices. However, for those of you that have attended a lot of our classes, you've seen the video that we show. And, you know, we get that reaction from everybody. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that, you know, still think you can throw bleach on everything and it kills it. Bleach is a great sanitizer for bacteria. You know, doesn't work on the rooting system of mold. It'll come back. It dries up. It's not, there's all kinds of issues. And if you can use a high enough concentration of bleach to really be effective, you can't be in the building. So, you know, how toxic do you want to get compared to doing things less toxic, safer, that are effective? That's a whole nother discussion, whole nother training. But again, this is the kind of stuff that we try to bring to everybody. So hopefully all of you watching on the other social media platforms, just being exposed to normie, you put the app on your phone, you take a look at normie.org, our main website, go to join.normie.org, and we're going to be jumping over to the impact room in about 2-3 minutes. So any other questions?
I
No?
didn't see any.
Okay, well, I want to thank everybody out on the social media platforms and on normie.tv. I will be shutting that feed down now. Everybody else that's an active normie member, please go to please go to impact.normie.org. If you're not a normie member, go to join.normie.org and you can get in. And please remember, if you got that text message that was sent to the app, to please take care of it before 11:59 p.m. Eastern tonight. All right, if you have any questions, you can contact us tomorrow and we can help you walk through that process. All right, everybody, stand by while I shut down the public feeds, and we will be right back here in our Zoom room.